Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Wheaton. This episode we are going to work on some of the transitions from this main kind of commercial strip over into more suburbs and maybe some light medium apartment complexes that's going to be closer to the commercial area. But first things first, we are going to be kind of reworking a little bit of the roadways, making a little bit more of a grid pattern, not perfect squares or anything like that, but just nice kind of angular geometry to kind of make the area around the commercial district a little bit more dense. And then as we get farther away, what will happen hopefully is we'll get a little bit more of that sprawl, the little cul-de-sacs branching out into the trees and away from the town, and things become a little less grid-like the farther out we get from this area. You can also see that we're doing a kind of street progression, right? So pretty much one block out from the main drag, you're gonna have a nice 2-lane with grass, and then that's going to transition to a simple 2-lane, and then we're going to transition to industrial roadways. This is going to hopefully provide some good contrast of the roads, color, and also the width and just general looks to the city, so that we get some nice contrast. And then also, heck, I just wanted to. I don't know if it makes sense sometimes, but Uthris does what he wants sometimes as well. We're going to start by laying out a few apartment buildings, some nice medium ones, and then also designing a few custom complexes. Went ahead and downloaded, of course, more building assets. It seems like every time I start up City Skylines, I immediately just kind of hop into the workshop and be like, okay, what am I going to work on this episode? Oh, let's work on some of the suburbs and transitions therein, and see what we might need for this kind of stuff. So I downloaded some more modern kind of apartment complexes, and again, this is kind of keep clashing with these older kind of standard, probably 1950s other buildings nearby. Is that Wheaton's gone through multiple stages of growth, and now they're trying to maybe get that younger crowd in, like we were talking about last episode. So that's what these apartments are like. In fact, where I'm at currently, they are kind of building an apartment complex kind of like this nearby. I did go inside. It's way beyond my budget to live in. However, it was very nice, and it had this really cool kind of verticality play into it, and I really liked that layout. So I kind of tried to copy that a little bit this episode. If you guys are ever really kind of short on ideas or don't quite know what you might want to do in any building game, I always suggest taking a walk outside, especially city builders, and take note of just your general surroundings, trying to figure out what might be in the area, and just straight up either copy it or use it as a reference to make your own stuff. It's a really good way. It's a good way to make things believable. And again, that's always kind of my goal whenever I'm building something. It's less about like being hyper realistic and more or less being just believable enough so that at a glance you're like, yeah, this looks nice. Like it looks like a real town. Someone could live here. And yeah, over here I think this is some more King Leno assets going down. I'm trying to find a good mix of some new light residential apartment buildings. I don't want everything to be multi-storied kind of apartment complexes. They kind of, in my opinion, start looking a little too same like. And in my hometown where I grew up in, a lot of apartment complexes generally were made out of smaller groupings of buildings or very plain kind of linked together surfaces, and I just want to try and maintain that as we progress here. Behind this set, I decided that it'd be cool to have a little bit of a park area. We haven't really have time to add these type of things, But eventually, I will start getting yelled at this episode for some of these apartments being like, oh, the land value here sucks. Why are you building me here? Well, one, you look nice, and two, I'll just build a park. You'll be perfectly happy to be in this area going forward. Thank you very much. So we're going to have some tennis courts, we're going to have a plaza, and a couple basketball courts in this area. This is going to be like a little bit of a break. It's kind of going to be like this side's kind of recreation area. I would probably like to see a little bit more to it, but for space reasons, we're just going to keep it like this. Try and put in some more trees and things, but at least, you know, fence off the basketball courts, fence off the tennis courts, keep the plaza in the middle. We will kind of break up the wall on the other side of it a little bit more. That way it just, you know, has a little bit more access for people walking by and things like that. We're gonna add some tables in the plaza area. I don't know if they're really functional, but they look nice. So that's always a bonus for me. Still trying to work on raising land value, and I figured, well, right across the street, there's a nice little triangle patch. Isn't that, you know, overly, I guess there's not enough room for a building is what I want to get across here. And so I'm just going to put a little bit of a walking path going through it, you know, a restroom, a gazebo, just to kind of expand out the plaza kind of territory of this area. Running into a little bit of a problem getting these basketball courts to behave with the road network. I can never really tell why, you know, the first time I lay it down, it doesn't complain, and then I have to delete it and relay it down in the exact same orientation. Then it's like, oh, there's a road there. I don't have to complain anymore. So I don't know why it does that. Wish I knew, but alas, City Skylines to me is definitely not a strong suit, at least not yet. A little bit of a apartment complex. I feel like I'm starting to reuse the U-shape kind of motif of these buildings a little too much. So I do want to try and get away from that. We're also going to detail out this modern complex area just to make it feel a little bit more grounded eventually. We'll be using, you know, decals, putting a little bit of a plaza nearby as well, and expand the park over towards this area. You know, we're going to add a dog park nearby. And then I think we'll also surround the park with a walking path, you know, just so people can get out and walk around if that's something they want to do. Was thinking about adding a little bit of a light commercial building here. Couldn't really find anything that really fit the area. And so, of course, we'll eventually go back and kind of find some more assets so that we can start filling in a lot of these gaps. But, you know, they kind of come as the series progresses, and I think that's really important, at least for my sanity, because I tend to have a problem with if I have too much choice, then I get nothing done. So it's just better for me to have it like this. The dog park, it was all dirt. I don't like that look at all, so I went ahead and just decaled that out for just some nice trimmed grass. Kind of fill that in a little bit. We'll add some trees for some shade for the dogs, you know. Don't want them to just be completely out in the sun. So some shade bushes nearby. Also some shrubs on the outside, just so that maybe the noise levels can go down a little bit. And just overall raise the land value by doing all of this, you know, extra park-like work nearby. We have a big housing demand still. You can see our RICO there at the bottom. The housing is starting to go down a little bit. So next episode, we'll probably end up doing a little bit more industry and commercial, just to start balancing that out again. But at the end of last episode, you guys probably noticed that we were getting yelled at for homes. So it's really important to pay attention to that as we progress. And again, I'm doing this as a creative but also somewhat believable simulation game, just for a little bit of challenge, and using those kind of RICO limitations to kind of push us and pull us in different directions along the town. It is still a very small population, only about 3,000 citizens. So that'll slowly ramp up as well. I think in the current state, we're still not even at 10,000, so we have a ways to go to get there. But this is just one of those really big kind of moments to build up those kind of numbers. It'll also hopefully help our income because money concerns will be a thing. Now, you saw me there a second ago go in with Theme Mixer and change the concrete decals or texture more or less to a different version here. I didn't like the constant grid lines from the other pack. I don't think it looked great, especially since it was repeating and the grid lines never really kind of followed the curve of roads or the curve of sidewalks, so it just never really made much sense to me to have them like that. So we upgraded that to just a standard kind of concrete color. It's a little bit more plain, easier to work with, doesn't have really too much of a special treatment to it, and I think that's probably for the best. Adding some decals now finally along the other kind of apartment complex. This is a just nice dark brown brick that you might see kind of in near walking paths or more modern additions to cities. Really hard to kind of fit some of these corners because I didn't have like a round piece of this decal, so I've decided to actually leave the corners kind of just squared off. You know, maybe they used a different material to round off those corners, provide a little bit of a texture break as well, so that could be interesting. Over here we are dedicating a whole city block to a little bit more of a larger police station compound. Crime was starting to become a little bit of an issue, and you know, I wanted a nice kind of bigger building because this is going to be a medium-sized city or town. It kind of depends on how people look at it. I call this a town right now. Definitely not a city, but hopefully eventually it'll get up there. Add another little side building like an annex off of this other section, so maybe one is a little bit more of a jail side of the police station and slash parking lot for the employees, and maybe the original police station that was there, and this one on the right is a little bit more modern, a little bit more new. Add some light decal line work through the area just so that it looks like people can drive up, do a U-turn in front of that police station. It's not actually too functional. Vehicles in this game, I kind of wish I could control their pathing into areas a little bit more than I can currently. It just doesn't really fit, and so if you guys are running into those problems, I would suggest placing a building down, seeing where the traffic interacts with it, and then go in and build these fences and the line decals and all these things to kind of tie this whole thing together. I think that just works a little bit more. Over here, gonna go ahead and build another elementary school just to kind of fill in the area. For some reason, I really liked this elementary school kind of compound, but giving me a little bit of a texture glitch with the way it was interacting with the dirt. So I went with another just kind of basic school look, you know, just a nice square. We'll kind of zone off that whole city block. Maybe we'll get to detailing that a little bit later because, again, this episode's, you know, even though we need education and schooling, we want to get the suburbs kind of placed and going here. Start looking at a little bit more of a solid look for these city blocks and streets and kind of yards. I'm not going to be detailing all of these yards. Really, my biggest thing that I'm going to be doing is laying down a bunch of buildings and kind of blending the areas with trees. I find that to be kind of the quickest way to go about laying out suburbs. You can, you know, do some really nice yard work here and there to maybe break it up if that's getting a little too much for you. But just going in and doing every yard is not something that I really enjoy. So maybe find some assets that have the yards kind of already prefab built. That's a good way to go about it. But like even these yards right here, I'm not going to do a whole lot of fence work. I'm not going to, you know, dictate out, oh, this is this dude's property line or what have you. It's just not really worth my time. I don't know why that one has a whole bunch of tire tracks, and it was kind of weird that that building came with so many tire kind of tracks through the concrete. Didn't really make much sense, so ended up just kind of painting off that concrete there, and just so they can have a bit of a yard. The tire tracks are still there, decal wise, but not really noticeable at that point. I don't know if I can get rid of decals on buildings, to be honest. Using Prop It Up, I could maybe look into that. Maybe it requires the advanced feature to be on, which I don't have turned on at this point just yet. So you can see here, trying to use a mixture of kind of thicker tree groupings in the backyards, just to cover up all that greenery space, and then some smaller, lighter trees on the front yard so that you can still see the front of the homes. And then that combination kind of provides a nice natural transition from low to high kind of sight lines. So that's something, you know, just to keep in mind as you are building this. I am also putting these homes pretty close together. They're not gonna have, you know, large side yards or massive backyards, because to me that's just more stuff that I have to potentially detail out. And why do that when I could just put down some trees? It's always a good time. Getting some police kind of warnings there, surprisingly. Was checking that out. We have 3 police stations for just 3,200 people, so I don't know what's up with that. I mean, my hometown is 3,000 people, and we only had like what felt like a half a police station to kind of dictate that area. Then again, it wasn't as dense as this place, so maybe it's a little bit different. Who knows? I really like the oak tree we are using. It's probably one of my favorite tree assets on the workshop. This thing is a nice, big, thick, bushy tree that you can use a little bit of, and it really covers a wide area. It looks great, and I might overuse it here and there, but I just like the fullness of those trees, far more than the default trees that you run into in City Skylines. So at this point, we're pretty much done with today's speed build episode. I'm gonna go ahead and leave you guys with a few cinematics so you can enjoy the sights as we look around. I'm gonna do some of these suburbs off camera. It's just gets a little repetitive, and I don't have much more to say after a certain point. So with that, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next episode of Wheaton.